I get up there and I start talking, all these Cheyenne people and the Arapahoes about Black Kettle, and they're like looking at me like, why is he talking about Black Kettle? He's our relative, we know who he is. And I said, well, the reason I'm doing that is because standing right next to me here is Miss Alicia Custer, and she wants to say something to you. And then everybody was absolute quiet. And then she took the mic and talked to them for a few minutes and apologized for all of the terrible things her uncle had done to the land, to the people. And when she was done, the grandmothers just took her in and hugged her and blessed her. And then the woman that was taking the spirit plate out into the bush, I suggested, I said, why don't you leave that food offering so that Custer and Black Kettle can have that food in the spirit world, and they can make peace in the spirit world. And as soon as Alicia was done with her apology, she totally softened and became somebody else. And then I realized that it was her uncle that was there to apologize, and he was in her. And once she gave the apology, he was able to finally go. So he was trapped. And later I asked her, well, what compelled you to do this? And she said that ever since she was 12, he has been appearing to her as a little girl and asking her to do this for him. And she resisted it for all that time because, people are going to think she's crazy. But she finally was able to do that. And so it brought a tremendous healing to the native people, but also to the perpetrator. See, because both have to heal. You can't heal just half of the equation, because then it's still broken over here. And then another Cheyenne grandma that was there, I was talking to her, and she said she had been to Fort Robinson recently. And that's where the Cheyenne people were also kept after the breakout, and under horrible conditions, no food or water for days on end. And she says when she was looking into the what used to be the barracks, she saw a young soldier, a blue coat, in one of the rooms, and he was trapped in there. And he was asking her for forgiveness. And I asked her, well, what did you do? And she says, I forgave him. And then he was able to go. And so, that's the kind of healing that a lot of Native people are doing around historical trauma. And a lot of the healing also requires the forgiveness of the perpetrator, like the grandmas doing all that traveling to heal the steppes where a lot of people were killed and massacred, but also healing the soldiers. And so that's something that needs to continue to happen. Yes, Dr. Schindler.
I just wanted to kind of talk as a non-native person who's worked with indigenous people for quite a long time. And basically what I want to say is that, well, for one thing, I really wish that everybody who came to work here and who came to work in the schools and in the Indian Health Clinic would actually learn about historical trauma before they start at work, because it really changes your perspective. If you understand the idea of historical trauma, then you can make, it just really changes how you look at the people here. So I want to say that, and just a few examples for myself. Let's see, probably in 1985 or so, I was living in Berkeley, California, and I started going to this Black Catholic gospel church. And I joined the choir, and it was all Black women and me. And eventually, it became really clear that the ladies in the church needed a support group because they were going through lots of bad stuff. And so I offered to, I was a young psychiatrist, I said, well, I'll do that, I'll do a support group. And so a lot of the ladies would come to the support group, and all of a sudden, one week, they all quit coming. And then I was told that what happened was someone else had started a prayer group right at the same time, the same night that I was doing my basic, support group. And so all the ladies switched from my group to the prayer group. And at the time, I got really offended because I was driving a long distance, to go do this support group. And, of course, I wasn't getting paid or anything, but I just thought, wow, how could they do that? They didn't even tell me. I was really offended. And later on, much later, I came to realize that I was trying to do therapy with them the way I knew how to do it. And how they really felt comfortable was through prayer group. So they were really doing the same thing in the prayer group as I was doing, but it was just sort of a little different. And so culturally, I wasn't doing the right thing by them. And years later, I felt really badly that I had said no. Actually, I think they asked me to do a group later on, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So then, after living there for quite a while, my family and I moved to New Zealand, and I started working eventually with the Maori population. And in our little town, we had a Maori mental health team, and I was their psychiatrist. So again, I was the only non-Maori person on this team. And at one point, we were in a clinic meeting, and I said something, and it was pretty trivial, really. And the Maori team got very upset with me. And the leader of the team took me outside and said, Donna, you shouldn't have said that. You really, really offended our team by what you said. And by that time, I'm like, I just don't get it. I'll just stop. I won't be your psychiatrist. I'm going to quit. And she said to me, well, really what you need to do is go to the Treaty of Waitangi meeting. And you need to learn about the Treaty of Waitangi. And I'm like, well, whatever, so I'll go. So the Treaty of Waitangi what it taught me about was how the British took over New Zealand, and it talked about how that affected the Maori people, which is very much about similar as to what happened here, And after I went to the Treaty of Waitangi, I just saw the whole thing from a different perspective, and I was able to see I was able to understand the Maori perspective, and as time went on, I said nothing wrong. I used to say everything wrong, and little by little, I really understood, where they were coming from. But it took a while, and it took me going to that training. And the other thing that happened, that then brought us to being here in Kayenta, and not too long after I got here and learned about historical trauma, we had a meeting in counseling services, and we asked Mr. Deswood Bradley to come and his wife because we wanted to do an NAC meeting, and we were asking him to put it on for us. And so in that meeting, I was the only non-native person, and we showed Mr. Bradley this video, and it was called Red Road to, it wasn't Red Road, I think it was Red Road to Sobriety. And that video there's a lot of different Native people in that video, and they're talking about the bad things that happen to Native people in this country. And at the end of the video, Mr. Bradley looked right at me and he said, if you want to help my people, you have to learn how to speak Navajo. And so I've been here long enough to know that that would be really, really hard to do. And I said something like, well, I don't think I'll be able to do that, but I do want to help your people. At the end of the meeting, and it was just about 6 or 7 of us in a little conference room, we all, as people do at the end of meetings, everybody shook hands as they left. And so Mr. Bradley came past me and did not shake my hand. And his wife followed him, and she did not shake my hand. So actually the next morning I called up Dr. Duran and I asked him, what should I do about this? You probably don't remember. So he told me to get some, I think a medicine pouch and some sage, and so I did, and I went to Mr. Bradley's house. He lived up on the hill at the time, and I was pretty nervous, actually, going to his house, because he was pretty mad at me during that meeting. And I went to his house, knocked on the door, and they let me in, and he was sitting on the couch, and I went in, and I sat down, and I stuck out the bag of corn pollen, and I said really fast, as fast as I could, I'm really sorry, for what the government did to your people, and I'll do whatever I can to help. and as fast as I could. And he just looked at me and big smile. And that was it. Mr. Bradley and I were really pretty close from then on.